Hi, everybody. It's nice to be around people. I'm a graduate student, so no, seriously. I mean, I spent a lot of time alone, like behind a book and a computer screen, and so I think, you know, and this is kind of obvious, but my aha moment this morning, thank you so much to the practitioner panel, was, you know, you can't like read and think your way to justice and decolonization, right? You can't do it inside your own head, which I think is maybe, it can be a trap for me, I know, as a grad student, or thinking that I need to read everything before I say anything. And I think it can be a way of not engaging in difficult conversations too. So I would just offer that. And you know, this is difficult for me. If I had my way, coming from a background in environmental ed, I'd say like, let's think fair share, you know, talk to each other, circle up, we play games, you know. But sometimes you have to try to say something, and so I'm gonna try to say something, and I'm gonna put something out there, and then hopefully you'll respond, and we'll get a chance. And if it's wrong, say it's wrong, you know. So it's good to try to say things. So I'm gonna try to do that. Thank you, Sarah, so much for inviting me to be on this panel. And again, thank you for everyone who's here. Thank you to the people, especially who are uncomfortable talking about race and settler colonialism, or are new to this, but you're still here, so thanks. And probably more importantly, thank you to the people who've been doing this work for a long, long time, and have remained patient or not. You know, this shouldn't be an expectation, but thank you so much again for being here. So, as a second-year master's student, I feel like I should explain why I'm up here with these amazing scholars. I'm not an expert on environmental justice. I'm not an expert on race. I'm not an expert on public lands. Don't leave. I am, however, someone who's coming from, who worked in the field of conservation, has spent 2 years thinking critically about that work, and now kind of thinking about how I would go back into that world, and so that's what I have to offer today. So before entering my master's program, I worked for several years for the Student Conservation Association. I began working in their community program in Detroit, and I didn't have a strong background in environmental studies or sciences. I came to the community program because I like working with high school students, and because the Detroit program had a strong focus on social and environmental justice. From there, I moved to Oakland, California, and continued working with SCA. I went on to lead crews of high school students doing backcountry trail work in Yosemite and North Cascades National Park. And what I found was that the conversations I had with students in Oakland, talking about racial and environmental justice, were not the conversations I was having with students in Yosemite, talking about Meteor, Roosevelt, and the foundation of the parks. I had read William Cronin's famous essay, The Trouble with Wilderness, as an undergraduate, and I wanted to bring that critique into my backcountry cruise, but I couldn't just throw readings at them, and I wasn't clear on the implications of the critique myself. I needed to get a better understanding of the scholarly conversation that was happening around wilderness conservation and their consequences. I wanted to better understand the work I was doing and its limitations. And so I came back to school, and I started asking simple questions. What is the project of conservation education? How is it framed? What types of environmental ethics get reproduced? Who is it meant to serve? And how are we asking students to perceive and engage with nature in ways that we deem correct? In trying to answer these questions, I've engaged with scholarship that uncovers what one author calls the hidden attachments to environmentalism, of ideas like wilderness to a U.S. history of imperialism, xenophobia, and racism. I argue that conservation education hasn't done enough work in interrogating these historical attachments, understanding the social and political forces that have shaped public land and land use in the United States, and understanding this history and examining this history should be included in the work that we do with Youth on Public Lands. We have to do this if we want to be effective educators, if we want to actually prepare young people to address the roots of the interlinked exploitation of land and people that has defined U.S. history. Understanding this history also allows educators to see the ways in which conservation and environmental education remain exclusionary, serving the interests and needs of a privileged few. I found in my time working with SCA that conservation work is challenging for group members. It's a physical challenge to build trail and clear brush and hike back and forth to work each day. It's a social challenge to spend almost every minute of your day with the same 8 people for a month in the backcountry, cooking, working, living in tents. Yet I think we often miss a great opportunity to challenge participants morally or ethically, to question the often unchallenged rightness of conservation efforts on public lands and the history embedded in those lands. And so I got to thinking, if I were going to do it all over again, if I were going to lead a crew tomorrow, if I were to be given the extraordinary opportunity to work with 8 students in the backcountry for a month, think about that opportunity. What would I do differently? And so I came up with 3 things. The first one, I would acknowledge the link between settler colonialism, Native American dispossession, and U.S. public lands. This is something we did not do on our cruise, and if we did talk about indigenous people in parks, it was as part of that park's crew history. In doing so, we denied the existence and political agency of living indigenous people with claims to that land. Professor Wald begins one of our Introduction to Environmental Studies courses having students interrogate the idea of wilderness as a social construction that has real historical and harmful impacts. They come to understand it as a culturally situated ideal, not a historical truth that exists outside the realm of human culture and politics. Thus, the idea is not morally neutral, and so a conservation crew working or recreating in a wilderness area should not assume the place to be morally neutral or unambiguously good. We should ask, is the way that we are framing conservation work, wilderness, the project of conservation education, erasing a violent past, a violence that was central to the foundation of U.S. public lands? What would it mean to challenge a Eurocentric geographical imaginary? How would it change a crew's experience to begin by acknowledging that public land is still on land? And how does knowing this history change our responsibilities? As geographer Reuben Rose Redwood notes, those of us who are uninvited visitors on settler-occupied indigenous lands cannot pretend to be neutral on the moving train wreck that is settler colonialism under alignment. Second, I would examine and complicate the historical scripts that we consciously or unconsciously ask students to play when doing conservation work. And a part of that, I think you mentioned this morning about feeling if you had to wear a mask, or you had to wear a mask. And so one of the questions I had is as in the field of conservation, what types of masks are we asking students to put on and to play? And so I would say whether we know it or not, we are working from assumptions about how to correctly engage with nature, and that these ideas get passed on to the students we're working with. And so are we asking them to be John Muir, to develop an aesthetic appreciation of sublime nature? Is the expectation that students will have a transcendent spiritual encounter? If they don't, is there something wrong with them? Or are we asking students to treat wilderness as a kind of training ground for building physical fitness and moral character? Are we expecting a trailblazing frontier encounter where students overcome obstacles, bag peaks, and find themselves in an unpeopled wilderness? Critical scholarship has shown these stories condition us to experience nature in certain ways. And scholarship has also shown how these discursive frames are exclusionary and may reinforce social hierarchies. As Houston Baker notes, the legends of men conquering wild and virgin lands are not the legends of Black America. The stories of benevolent theocracies bringing light and salvation to pagans are not the stories of Black America. And the tales of pioneers enduring the hardships of the West for the promise of immense wealth are not the tales of Black America. When the Black American reads Frederick Jackson Turner's The Frontier in American History, he feels no regret over the end of the Western frontier. To Black America, frontier is an alien word, for in essence all frontiers established by the white psyche have been closed to the Black man. And yet a frontier imaginary keeps returning in conservation education. Now you might be saying to yourself that these are not my scripts, but I would ask you, which scripts are you enacting? And just to think, where did they come from and who do they serve? That's the question. And I think this is where the environmental humanities do a good job of saying this is kind of the cultural water that you're swimming with, and just again identifying and naming those stories, those scripts, those masks that we're asking young people to assimilate to or to put on. So, as Carolyn Finney argues in her book, Black Faces, White Spaces, we need to be aware of the stories that have been left out of the dominant narratives of wilderness and environmentalism. We read Muir in Yosemite, but not Du Bois at the Grand Canyon. And so we must recover, recognize the excluded stories, as well as make space for the construction of new stories. And what if this were the project of a crew? coming up with new scripts, new ways of being in nature based off the experience of young people. Not just a crew of backcountry trail builders, but a crew of backcountry environmental humanists. Imagining the future. We can work on the name. It's not good. And I want to say too, like I think it's important, and I don't know if anyone else will address this, but I think it's important to trust young people, to trust that they can have these conversations and in fact need to be part of the conversation. And so it's essential to engage them when working to try to understand a more just, equitable, inclusive way of relating to nature. So, trust the people who you're working with. And so at third and finally, I would try to work against some of the ways that conservation education can function as a form of escape. And so William Cronin notes the trouble with wilderness is that it can enable escape from history and the responsibility for our own actions that history entails. I think another form of escape occurs when educational experience is centered solely on individual and personal growth. I like this quote from Philip Deloria, who's writing about 60s and 70s U.S. counterculture and how it appropriated indigenous culture and symbols. He says, indeed, the New Age's greatest intellectual temptation lies in the wistful fallacy that one can engage in social struggle by working on oneself. And at times I fear that this can be the case with education as well. And so we need to be deliberate about how conservation work fits into a larger project of justice. So being deliberate about that and building that into the structure of your work and your crew. And then, all this being said, I want to highlight the fact that students will bring different needs and perspectives to these crews. Some know the violent history, some have experienced it, others will be completely oblivious. So some need the moral challenge, but others could use an escape. So, it's hard to know, and it's hard to give sort of universal recommendations. Really being aware of that, because in making conservation education ethically challenging. We need to be careful not to further marginalize or tokenize students in order to address the ignorance of a privileged audience. So there's a request one more time. In making conservation ethically challenging, we need to be careful not to further marginalize or tokenize students in order to address the ignorance of a privileged audience. It's important. But if the goal of environmental education is the development of environmentally literate citizens capable of addressing contemporary environmental problems, and if we recognize that the roots of these problems can be found in a history of settler colonialism, racism, and exploitation, then we must be sure that we understand these histories and center them in the educational experience. There's no place, not wilderness, not public lands, that has not been shaped by this history. And so I'll leave you with a simple question. Knowing this history, what will you do differently in your work? Thanks so much.